20 years ago today, it is hard to believe, but 20 years ago today, the Red Sox opened up the 2004 World Series and won Game 1 over the St. Louis Cardinals at Fenway Park. We go back in time and dig deep into that box score from Game 1 of the 2004 World Series with our guy Michael Lynch, and you can join us too if you're with us on the Locked On Sports Boston YouTube channel. You are right where you need to be. You are Locked On Red Sox.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Steve Lennox with you, host of the Locked On Red Sox postcast during the 2024 Major League Baseball regular season. We were hoping to get into October. We did not. Tuesday night, we had the debut of Locked On Celtics postcast. You can join that part of the Locked On Sports Boston YouTube channel as well. Where is Gabby? Gabby will be back in a few weeks. If you're just joining us for the first time, I'm filling in for Gabby Hurlbut. Now, Gabby Maljanian for Locked On Red Sox. So glad to have you on board with us. We're going to be joined by Michael Lynch in just a few moments. Actually, you know what? I'm going to get to the line of scrimmage here. I'm going to let you know that our latest Locked On Red Sox is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you are going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, we do invite you to participate in today's show, Locked On Red Sox episode. We do want to hear from you, our everydayers and our first-timers. Join the conversation, watching live on the Locked On Red Sox YouTube channel. Thank you. We want your comments. We want you to join the conversation. So I am going to do some things. I was going to do my Netflix review of episode number 1 of The Comeback, the 2004 Red Sox. Instead, I'm going to bring my friend in, Michael Lynch. Michael's going to give a little bio background here in just a moment, but I just want to tell you about my friendship with Michael Lynch, because I really do believe this is something that's baseball, right? Because Michael and I have now known each other, hard to believe, but pretty much 13 to 14 years. And I say he's a dear friend, and yet we've never met. And a big part of I can say that is because of the game of baseball. So, Michael, appreciate you coming in with us. We're going to go all the way through here. And I know you were a little stressed about joining us earlier this morning. We do appreciate you coming on. I'm going to do a live read at about the 10-minute mark. I'm going to give you that right now. Instead of doing 5 minutes on the documentary on the Red Sox 2004 season, we're going to get into the box score. Michael's going to do a great job doing that. Michael is part of SeamHeads.com. He's also a big part of the Negro Leagues database and the Negro League stats now being verified and a part of Major League Baseball stats as well. Michael, what else do you add to your bio?
Boy, let's see. Seamheads launched in 2007, so it's been 17 years. I've written 5 books about baseball history. I've contributed to probably 25 more, hundreds of articles on the site, and just a diehard Red Sox fan. I have been, I'm assuming, since the day I was born. So, my dad, it goes all the way back to my grandfather. He used to collect Boston Globe articles about Babe Ruth when he was still playing for the Red Sox. So it just kind of went down. And my father was a big Ted Williams fan, and then later Carl Yastrzemski. Yaz ended up being my favorite player because he was my dad's favorite, and I followed the team religiously for as far back as I can remember.
So if I don't, you can kick me in the head later on, but I want to bring up Yaz as we have this discussion here on Locked On Red Sox. So Michael certainly brings the credentials. We're going to talk about 20 years ago today, Game 1 of the World Series in just a few moments. We'll thank Baseball Reference in advance as we're going to go through that box score, and Michael's going to give his account of Game 1 of the 2004 World Series. But I do want to start with the Netflix documentary released perfectly today on the 20th anniversary of Game 1 of the World Series that we'll get into. Have you watched, not putting you on the spot, but I know you're going to watch, but have you watched at least the first episode?
Not yet. I watched highlights on YouTube from Game 1 just to get caught up again because it's been 20 years and I barely remember yesterday. So
I hear you. I understand. So if I told you watch episode 1 It takes you to Game 7 of the 2003 American League Championship Series. And if I told you that you'll relive everything from the time the current ownership took over Theo Epstein instead of Billy Beane in the front office to lead the front office as the general manager. If I told you at the end of episode number 1, which concludes at the end of the 2003 American League Championship Series, if I told you you were going to cry in the final 8 minutes of episode number 1, what do you think would bring tears to your eyes? And not the home run by Boone, but there's a guy that's part of that's in there that would make you cry in the final 7-8 minutes of episode number 1.
It'd have to be Wakefield. Tim
nailed
Wakefield. He was a phenomenal human being, great pitcher. Unfortunate to give up the home run. I mean, what can you say? It's not his fault. I mean, he throws a knuckleball. Boone put a good swing on it. He's one of those guys where I never held that against him. It was just Boone did a great job. It's Tim Wakefield. I was okay with it. I obviously wasn't happy with the outcome, but I never went. It wasn't like a Calvin Schiraldi meltdown situation. Still trying to defend, Bill Buckner years later that he's not the reason they lost. Anyway, so yeah, but that would probably choke me up. Is just seeing Tim.
Yeah. Because you hear it, there's a lot of interviews in episode number 1, but you hear his voice. And obviously they did not talk to him for this documentary, getting his first person account, but cameras in the clubhouse and guys going up to him and him at his locker, and then him post game with the media. But it's the voice of Tim Wakefield, and that got to me a little bit, and that's where I choked up. So I know you will, and it's perfectly fine. I'm just giving you fair warning. You're gonna love it. You're absolutely gonna love it. And it just does a terrific job. I'd be a hypocrite if I say I was offended by the F-bombs. I'm not, but wow, Theo, a lot of guys drop a lot of F-bombs in there as well. In that final, and I don't want to give everything away here, and I certainly won't, but in that final, sort of that, Aaron Boone home run, Doug Mirabelli is on camera talking about Wakefield, and he shared on Wakefield, he was always ready, always had his spikes on, no matter if he was scheduled to pitch or not. He was always going to be ready to go and wasn't going to go back to the clubhouse. I thought that was a great share in episode number 1 along the way as well. So you've got 3 episodes. I've watched the first one, likely episodes 2 and 3 I'll watch tonight and maybe even Wednesday morning before our latest Locked On Red Sox. But let's get into 20 years ago today. Give us an idea of what it was like the previous 48 hours, really, more than that, 2+ days. We're not, you had to wait 2 full days before Game 1 of the World Series after coming from behind. But what was it like for you leading into Game 1 of the World Series back in 2004?
I think I had fooled myself into thinking that once we beat the Yankees and slayed that dragon, then I was going to be happy regardless. I thought for sure after Game 3 of the ALCS, they were done. And so the fact that they came back, won 4 straight to go to the World Series was absolutely amazing. I'm not ashamed to admit that I cried when that happened. I was with my son. My dad wasn't there to see it. And, so I thought about him. But going into Game 1, I felt good. But having, you go back to 1946, the last 4 World Series, they lost Game 7 every time. So I didn't want to get too excited. I was glad to be there, obviously, and I was excited for the series. I couldn't wait for it to start.
So in that ALCS down 3-0, win Game 4, you're down 3-1. You're still a game away from, a 1 loss away from elimination. At what point during that ALCS did you say, okay, I'm allowing the door to open a little bit, also understanding I could be hurt tonight, and this could be over tonight. Was there a point in time over those next 4 games, down 3-0, down 3-1, down 3-2, then tying it at 3-3, where you thought they could pull this off?
Being a lifelong Red Sox fan, I didn't feel comfortable until Johnny Damon hit the home run that started it all in Game 7. So I'd say at the end of Game 6, I thought, hey, we have something going on here. Everyone knows about Kevin Millar saying, don't let us win. whatever, and got to game 7. So when they jumped out to that lead, I finally started to breathe and relax. And of course, there's always that in the back of my mind, oh, how are they going to blow this one? And they didn't. So thank God for that.
Hey, I'm going to do a quick live read here, bring you back in. We'll start going into game 1 of the 2004 World Series, which took place 20 years ago today. Michael Lynch with SeamHeads.com, author as well, joining us here on our latest edition of Locked On Red Sox. And Locked On Red Sox is presented by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can get your start off your season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and much, much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed from FanDuel when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Yeah, I'll give myself a solid B for that live read with you there live, Michael. I was doing similar to you. You actually gave me the idea to kind of go back and look at highlights of the 2004 World Series. And, Baseball Reference does a wonderful job. And, I'm on there at least 2 or 3 times a day. I would imagine you might be similar. But as I was looking back at the Game 1 box score, and just the back and forth with how game 1 sort of played out. The Red Sox take an early 4-0 lead. They're up 7-2 after the first 3 innings. And the home run in the bottom of the 8th inning after the Cardinals had tied it up in the top of the 8th, Mark Bellhorn. Do we not talk about that home run enough that he won game 1 of the World Series 20 years ago today?
Probably not. I had to go look at the highlights again and looked at the box score, and then I remembered he hit the foul pole. I do remember that one. But all the credit usually goes to Big Papi because he's such a stud in the postseason. In fact, he homered earlier in the game, and it was his 5th home run of that postseason. But yeah, Bellhorn, once they tied it at 9, thank God for him, because again, watching the game, we're up 7-2. They start throwing the ball around. Manny makes a couple stupid errors, and next thing you know, again, I'm like, oh, how are they going to blow this one? And they pulled it out. So, and that, of course, started the sweep.
What was as you went back and looked at the highlights from 2004 and game, the entire, the 4-game series sweep over the St. Louis Cardinals, what sort of what highlight jarred your memory the most to sort of, look back and say, wow, I sort of forgot about that one?
Well, that's a good question. The Bellhorn home run, like I said, until I saw it, I remembered as soon as he hit it, I was like, all right, I remember this one hit the foul pole. The things that I forgot about were all the errors they made, because they made 4 errors in that game and still won. And of course, Manny went to make a sliding catch and he got his knee caught in the turf and the ball hit the back of his glove. I don't think he was going to catch it either way because of just the way his glove was. And I think the way that they were just chucking the ball all over the place. I think they threw it into the dugout a couple times, and that's how the Cardinals were able to get back into the game.
Wakefield goes 3 2/3, gives up the 5 earned runs in the outing. Any of the pitching performances stand out for you? You had Wakefield followed by Arroyo, Timlin, Embry, and then Keith Folk, inning and 2/3, gave up base runners, but able to get the job done.
Yeah, I think it was Folk, the fact that he went an inning and 2/3. These days, you're lucky if a starter goes out long. So the fact that the closer came in, went almost 2 innings, you don't see that very often anymore. That sticks out to me. And I think some of the Cardinals pitchers did fairly well, if I remember correctly. But, Julian Tavares or Julian, whatever you want to call him, left one out over the plate just enough for Bellhorn to smack it. And that was all she wrote.
Yeah, there's some interesting names for the Cardinals in game 1. Woody Williams went 2 1/3 innings, gave up 7 earned runs. And I talked with Ian Brown of MLB.com earlier this week, and his theme was that, the Cardinals didn't really have anyone in their rotation, that was going to blow you away. They weren't guys all throwing, the 97, 98 that we see out of the bullpen from, most big league teams nowadays, whether it's your first reliever out of the pen or your third or fourth guy. But, Dan Herron went 3 2/3 scoreless in relief. Did give up a couple of hits and 3 walks in that outing, but it was a lead that was not necessarily safe for the Red Sox in their Game 1 victory. But just in terms of jumping out, okay, we'll still get into the box score a little bit, but every fan, every person involved in 2004, where were you when? So where were you for Game 1 of the World Series, and did you stay in the same spot the rest of the series? And maybe I should have opened up with that instead.
I was living in Oregon at the time, not far from Mount Hood, and it was a small community. We had a house that was surrounded by trees. It was very private, and I had one of the rooms I turned into an office, basically a lot like what I'm seeing behind you. Had a desk, a nice big chair, a big screen TV in the corner, and so I kind of hunkered down and watched it that whole entire postseason. In fact, in that same spot. There were. My son laughs because he was there at the time. He was, I don't know, 11, 12 maybe. And just the weird things that I was doing when, Derek Lowe was pitching to the A's, and I was on an ottoman with my face down because I couldn't watch. And so every pitch he threw, I had to wait to see what happened, to look up to see if it was a strike. And he just looked at me like, "What is wrong with you?" That's the superstition of the game. So yeah, I do that a lot. I did it back then, and I don't know. I guess it worked.
It worked. We will. We're going over Game 1 with Michael Lynch of Seamheads.com, good baseball friend, dear friend, who lives up in the Boston area. Ortiz hits the home run in the first inning, 2 men on. We touched on the Bellhorn home run, but Ortiz. And you'll see it in episode number 1 of the Netflix 3-part series on the 2004 World Series and the comeback for the Red Sox, as well in the ALCS against the Yankees. But there was an interesting note in there about Ortiz was going to be sold from the Twins to a team in Japan, and Theo Epstein sort of said, "You know what? My dad said in this job you've got to be bold," and Theo sort of getting Ortiz, I guess it would have been off waivers before the 2003 season, the 2002-2003 offseason going into the 03 season. And Theo at that point ruffled a lot of feathers because it was sort of a gentleman's agreement that if a major league team was selling a player to Japan, then they wouldn't get in the middle of that. Theo Epstein did, and that landed David Ortiz. So Ortiz, 2003, going back, didn't really become Big Papi. And Kevin Millar did a great job of sort of chronicling it. He was a little frustrated. Wasn't getting the playing time that he thought he was going to get early on in the season, but really got in the starting lineup in a series in the Bronx against the Yankees in 2003. I think it was in July, homered a couple of times, and that brought Big Papi out. So that home run sort of added to his mystique with the Red Sox organization. Did you think, in that 2004 season, I mean, he was certainly one of the big personalities, but did you think at that point Big Papi was going to become Big Papi and David Ortiz and a Hall of Famer and in Red Sox lore at that point in time in Game 1 of the World Series 20 years ago today?
No, but I thought the Twins made a mistake by letting him go. I was aware of him. I liked him. I thought he was a good hitter. At the time, he was more doubles, line drive. He did have power. And so when they let him go, the first thing I thought was, oh, boy, I hope the Red Sox grab him. They did. They also grabbed a couple other guys. I think one of them was Giambi and another guy that was supposed to DH. And that didn't pan out. So they gave the job to Papi. I did not expect the Hall of Fame, the 50 homer seasons, the just all-around great hitting. I figured, Fenway, if he uses the Green Monster, he could hit 30 dingers, get some doubles. So he far exceeded anything that I thought he could do.
Michael, going down sort of that Game 1 lineup for Terry Francona, Game 1 of the World Series 20 years ago today, October 23rd, 2004. Damon, Cabrera, Ramirez, Ortiz, Millar, Mankiewicz came in to play first base as he did during that season. Trot Nixon, Gabe Kapler, Miller, we mentioned, Mirabelli, Veritek, Bellhorn, and there's Pokey Reese. getting into the game as a defensive replacement at second base. Whatever name I just mentioned there, give some thoughts on.
I saw Pokey in spring training. I was excited that we had him, but all those guys. I mean, Manny, one of the greatest right-handed hitters I've ever seen. Poppy, we already talked about. Kevin Millar was, I don't know if I would call him a professional hitter, but I like what he brought to the team. He was another guy that when they grabbed him, I was very happy about. Bill Miller, I absolutely love. I mean, he's the guy that got the hit off of Mariano that knocked in Dave Roberts, and he was a guy you could expect 300 from every season with a little bit of pop too. So, yeah, he was one of my favorites.
And you may know this, and you may have wanted to correct me, and you could have. I would have certainly been fine with that. I'm going to correct myself here. I screwed up big time there. It wasn't Ortiz going to Japan from Minnesota. It was actually Millar from Miami. So I apologize right then and there. That was bad on my part. I completely screwed that up. I do apologize. But it was Millar going to Japan in there. Again, another huge personality. Now with the Red Sox on, certain NESN broadcasts, you watch Millar on a NESN broadcast. A lot of times this past season, it was on, road trips. Arlington, he's from Texas, whether it was in Arlington against the Rangers or in Houston against the Astros. That personality has been there from the get-go with Millar. You watch him on a NESN broadcast, you almost have to leave the room for a couple of minutes just to take a little breather, where he's just, so much information. But, funny how sort of things, play out. And I picked up a few weeks ago, Terry Francona's book with Dan Shaughnessy on Terry Francona's Red Sox years. A couple of days later, he's the new manager of the Cincinnati Reds. And then I got this opportunity as well. But, as Terry Francona and Dan Shaughnessy were chronicling that 2004 run, Francona sort of learns about the fact that these guys are, knocking back shots of whiskey to sort of settle the nerves and all of that stuff. That's just one of many examples of what Terry Francona had to deal with his players, with the front office, with the fan base, things across the board. I've maintained for years. Now, there could have been other managers that could have broken the curse, and maybe it would have gone beyond 86 years, but Terry Francona, true in your estimate, or am I overstating it and there's some hyperbole in there? He was the perfect manager for that team, and he was the guy for that team to end up winning the World Series.
Yeah, I completely agree. He was a great players manager. I don't think he minded the whiskey. He had some issues himself, but I think that's a whole different animal than the beer and chicken wings crowd that eventually came along. I agree, and I'm torn about him coming back. I'm thrilled that he's back managing, but I also worry about his health because he had those health issues that had him retire 100%. In the first place. I'm rooting for him all the way. I hope the Reds do great. I hope he does great. He's always going to have a special place in my heart. Alex Cora, I like, but he's no Terry Francona. I mean, I don't think we'll ever see another one. I shouldn't say that, but in my lifetime in Red Sox history.
Hard to sort of say, from a managerial standpoint. And there are some guys, you could say are Hall of Famers based on their full body of work. Keith Hernandez comes to mind. Borderline Hall of Famer for me as a player. And I would say, no. I would go on the side of, as a player, very close, but not a Hall of Famer. But what he's done as a broadcaster with the Mets for all these years, put him in the Hall of Fame as you take the entire thing. Terry Francona for you can't say that as a player. But as a manager, Hall of Famer?
Yeah, I'd put him in. I think so. Yeah, I think he's the most successful manager in Red Sox history. He took the Indians to the World Series. I'd have to look at his record again, but
yeah,
if he sticks around long enough, and he's successful with the Reds, I think that he should be a lock. But I agree with you. Like guys like Dusty Baker, Lou Piniella, they had decent careers and they were good managers. So I can see them possibly. So, Francona, unfortunately, is not on their level as a player, but I think he's one of the better managers I remember.
All right, going to hit you with a couple more. And I really appreciate you bringing up that Francona side of, it's great to see him back in the dugout and managing at the big league level and doing what he loves to do. But then again, you take the health stuff into consideration as well with him. And if, he must be in good enough shape health wise where he took on this challenge, that he would have been fine away from the game. But health wise, he gets the seal of approval. He's good to go. We'll see him in the dugout for the Reds in 2025. All right. So, final thoughts on game one box score from Baseball Reference, the highlights that you watch. And also, how did you end up celebrating sweeping the World Series at Busch Stadium in St. Louis just a few days later?
I probably drank as much as I usually do. I don't remember going anywhere. Like I said, I lived in a remote area in the middle of nowhere, and there was a tavern probably right down the street. But to get to the nearest anything was a drive, and I'm like, I'm not making that drive. So basically, just reveled in it, watched everyone else celebrate, watched the news so I could see, because at the time I was 3,000 miles away, just to see what my Boston people were up to and how they were enjoying everything, and reflecting. Like I said, my dad passed away in 1987, and so he hasn't had a chance to see any of this. When he died, the Celtics had the championships, the Bruins had some championships, Sox had one since 1918, the Patriots hadn't won anything. So I just thought, wow, I wish he was here to see this. And even now, I think if I could bring him back for a day and tell him everything that's happened in the last 20 years, he wouldn't believe me unless he's looking down. But that's it was a bittersweet memory, but it was mostly sweet.
Let me know when you watch all 3 episodes of the Netflix docuseries. You're going to love it. Again, give you the heads up. You're going to cry at the end of episode number 1. Appreciate you as always. I appreciate you taking time during your lunch break. And hey, one of these days I'm going to buy you coffee or lunch or maybe dinner up in Boston.
All right, brother.
Michael Lynch. Thank you, sir.
All right. Take care.
Michael Lynch joining us here on Locked On Red Sox. Steve Lennox filling in for Gabby Hurlbut this week and next. Great chat with Michael. And I'm glad we did it on game number 1, the anniversary of game number 1 of the World Series. We may get into it, I think, next week. And again, if you're with us on the Locked On Sports Boston YouTube channel, or if you're following on X at Lennox on Baseball, throw some comments out there. What did you do to celebrate as we look forward to next week? Because it's going to be over the weekend where Game 4 took place in St. Louis and they won it in a 4-game series sweep. How did you celebrate? Were you at the parade? I would love to hear from you. Put things together. You can put it in the comments section on the Locked On Sports Boston YouTube channel or Locked On Red Sox YouTube channel as well. That's where Gabby has her stuff. And you can also send me a note on X at Lennox on Baseball. And we're going to share your comments over the coming days as well. I'm going to get back into the Netflix documentary. I'm not going to try to give away too many things from episode number 1, but there's some things I'm going to bring up. That's coming up next right here. Locked On Red Sox. Locked On Red Sox, presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks, you may know, is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. With Prize Picks, you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get on the action on the sports in over 30 states, including Florida, Georgia, Texas, and California. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an insurance policy when it comes to injuries. Yes, they have an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half, doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. Sign up today. Get a $50 instant bonus when you play your first $5. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks does discount select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value Pardon me there. For your lineups, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly. If you're with us on the podcast, I do apologize. If you're with us on Locked On Red Sox, I do apologize as well. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB. $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, segment number 3. Apologize for that little cough. Think it's cleared. Working on some guests next week. Can confirm. Pam Kim, Red Sox Senior VP, Community, Alumni, and Player Relations, may join us Thursday, may join us next Monday. She's going to join us at some point next week if she cannot go Thursday. We have lined up Red Sox minor league manager Chad Epperson. Appy. He's going to join us next Tuesday. We've gone live this week so far. We'll continue live Thursday, Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern start time on the Locked On Red Sox YouTube channel. We will go live next week, likely at noon Eastern. Schedule yourself as you like. And then we'll tell you, why is this guy filling in for Gabby? Gabby's going to be back week after next. We promise you that. That is in play. But tomorrow, if Pam cannot join us, then what we're going to do is go through Game 2 of the World Series from 2004, where the Red Sox took a 2-0 lead on the St. Louis Cardinals. As we get ready to wrap up here, again, if you're with us, Locked On Red Sox YouTube channel, hit the comment button. I may have been saying Locked On Sports Boston YouTube channel. It is Locked On Red Sox YouTube channel. So you can join the conversation there. Some thoughts as we wrap up here. And I'm still kicking myself about that Millar thing when I was talking with Michael Lynch, friend from Seamheads.com. It was Millar with that transaction, sold by the Marlins organization to Chunichi in Japan. Didn't happen. They have audio from WEEI radio in Boston. Guy with a thick Boston accent. Who is this guy, Millar? That was great. David Ortiz, again, in episode number 1, really came alive in July of 2003. Grady Little wasn't playing him the way Ortiz thought he should be in the lineup every single day. Conversation with Theo Epstein, got in the lineup. Red Sox in that series in the Bronx in 2003 in July, hit 7 home runs and an 11-3 victory, and that's where he started coming along. Then they chronicled sort of Pedro and Clemens hitting Millar, and then Pedro in the dugout saying, "Who do you want?" That was a nice one. That led to Kareem Garcia. Pedro hitting Soriano and Jeter and basically saying, hey, they went in the same ambulance to the same hospital. Then he did do the whole point to the head, and the cowboy up thing came into play as well. Doug Mirabelli talking about Tim Wakefield. Obviously, they had Red Sox fans know there was a special relationship there. Not only the battery when Wakefield, the knuckleballer, pitched, but they just had a strong friendship. And I'll tell you right now, I said it with Michael. If you have not watched episode number 1 yet of the Netflix 3-part documentary series, you're going to cry at the end of episode 1. You are. And there's nothing wrong with that. But to the man of who Tim Wakefield was, stand-up guy, away from the field, tremendous, on the field. And I think it was Mirabelli who said, we win. Wakefield's probably the American League Championship Series MVP. That was telling as well. Ian Brown, who we had on Monday, encourage you to go back and take a listen to the podcast or Locked On Red Sox YouTube channel. That interview is up and archived. Ian joined us on Monday from MLB.com, and he tweeted out today, and he sort of did his own little critique of the documentary series from Netflix. And he said, it's a story. Ian sent it out today. It's a story worth telling or retelling. And it really is. The video from the clubhouse, Theo Epstein dropping F-bombs, it's all terrific. The one thing I wrote down for myself is Curt Schilling, question mark, question mark, question mark. Grady Little's in there talking about leaving Pedro in 20 years later saying, I don't really remember a certain conversation. That might draw your ire just a little bit. But I'm wondering if Curt Schilling is going to be on the couch and talking to the Barnacle guys who put this documentary together. That is going to wrap it for us. Again, at Lennox on Baseball via X, formerly known as Twitter, if you want to join the conversation. And Pam Kim, hopefully tomorrow, if not tomorrow, next week. Pam is wrapping up her tenure with the Boston Red Sox organization as Senior VP of Community, Alumni, and Player Relations as well. That's going to do it for us with our latest edition of the Locked On Red Sox. For your first listen, check out Locked On MLB Podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic underway in Los Angeles at Dodger Stadium on Friday night with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. Again, we thank Michael Lynch. Visit the website, seamheads.com. We are back at it on Thursday on the Locked On Red Sox YouTube channel and with the Locked On Red Sox podcast as well. Thursday again on the Locked On Red Sox YouTube channel. We go live at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Locked On Podcast Network, your team, your Red Sox every day.